14 children stepped onto a yellow school bus on a crisp November morning in 2007. They were headed to Cedar Mountain Nature Reserve for a field trip they'd been excited about for weeks. They carried packed lunches, permission slips, and dreams of adventure. They never arrived at Cedar Mountain. They never came home. And for 18 years, nobody knew why. This is the story of the Pinewood 14. 14 children and 2 adults who vanished without a trace on what should have been an ordinary school day. And what investigators discovered 18 years later would shatter everything we thought we knew about that November day, revealing a truth so disturbing, so unthinkable, it would change not just one community, but how we think about trust, authority, and the monsters that hide in plain sight. Their names were Sarah Chun, age 11, Marcus Williams, age 10, Olivia Rodriguez, age 12, Daniel Morrison, age 9, Emma Patterson, age 11, Lucas Bennett, age 10, Sophia Kim, age 12, Nathan Cruz, age 9, Ava Thompson, age 11, Ethan Brooks, age 10, Mia Foster, age 12, Jackson Lee, age 9, Isabella Martinez, age 11, and Noah Campbell, age 10. 14 innocent children who trusted the adults in their lives. 14 families who would spend nearly 2 decades wondering what happened to their babies. 14 graves that would remain unmarked for 18 years. And 1 woman who died trying to save them all. Before we dive deep into this haunting case, if you're drawn to stories that explore the darkest corners of human nature and the mysteries that captivate our collective consciousness, make sure you're subscribed to Ultimate Crime Stories. We bring you the most compelling true crime narratives, meticulously researched and respectfully told. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Because some mysteries deserve to be remembered. Some truths demand to be told. Now, let's go back to where it all began. November 12, 2007. Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Population, 8,400. The kind of small town where everyone knows everyone, where doors are left unlocked, where children ride their bikes without supervision, and where the most exciting event of the year is the county fair each August. It's a town where nothing bad ever happens. Or at least, that's what people believed until November 12, 2007. Pinewood Middle School sat at the heart of Millbrook, a brick building constructed in 1962 that had educated 3 generations of local children. It housed 340 students in grades 5 through 8, and its halls were decorated with hand-painted murals, science fair projects, and decades of class photographs. The teachers were beloved. The principal, Robert Garrett, had been there for 19 years. Parents trusted the school implicitly, completely, without question. November 12, 2007 was supposed to be a special day. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, the school's most popular science teacher, had organized a field trip to Cedar Mountain Nature Reserve, about 45 miles north of Millbrook. Cedar Mountain was a beautiful stretch of protected forest with hiking trails, a visitor center, and an educational program designed specifically for middle school students. The trip had been planned for months. 14 students had signed up, their permission slips carefully filed, their parents excited for them to experience learning outside the classroom. Let me tell you about some of these children, because they weren't just statistics, they weren't just names on a missing persons report. They were real kids with real dreams, real personalities, real lives that were stolen from them. Sarah Chun was 11 years old, the daughter of 2 research scientists who had moved to Millbrook from California when Sarah was 5. She was brilliant, curious, always asking questions that made her teachers think. She wanted to be a marine biologist, even though Millbrook was nowhere near the ocean. She had checked out every book about ocean life from the town library, some of them multiple times. On the morning of November 12th, she told her mother, "I'm going to bring you back the prettiest rock I can find, Mom. I promise." Her mother would replay those words in her mind 10,000 times over the next 18 years. Sarah wore her favorite purple jacket that day. Purple was her color. She said it made her feel brave. Marcus Williams was 10 years old, the class clown, the kid who could make anyone laugh even on their worst day. He was one of 5 children in a chaotic, loving household where dinner was loud and laughter was constant. Marcus had saved up his allowance for 3 months to buy a disposable camera specifically for this trip. He wanted to photograph wildlife, maybe catch a picture of a deer or a fox. His best friend, Tommy Rodriguez, was supposed to go on the trip too, but Tommy woke up sick that morning with a fever. Tommy's mother kept him home. That decision probably saved Tommy's life. Tommy would spend the rest of his childhood and much of his adulthood consumed by survivor's guilt, wondering why he got to live when Marcus didn't. Olivia Rodriguez, no relation to Tommy, was 12 years old, the oldest student on the trip, and the most responsible. She was the kind of kid teachers loved, the one who helped without being asked, who looked out for younger students, who could be trusted with any task. Mrs. Hayes had specifically asked Olivia to come on the trip to help chaperone the younger children. Olivia's parents were immigrants from Mexico who had worked incredibly hard to build a life in Millbrook. They owned a small restaurant downtown, and Olivia worked there on weekends, bussing tables and doing homework in a back booth. Her parents had a bad feeling about the trip. Olivia's mother even told her husband, "I don't know why, but I don't want her to go." But Olivia was so excited, so eager to help Mrs. Hayes, that they gave in. They signed the permission slip. They let her go, and they would never forgive themselves. Daniel Morrison was 9 years old, the youngest child on the trip, and he was nervous. It was his first big field trip without his parents, and he'd never been away from home for a whole day before. His mother, Christine, had serious doubts about letting him go. Daniel had anxiety, he was sensitive, he got homesick easily. But his older brother had been on a Cedar Mountain trip 2 years earlier and had loved it, and Daniel desperately wanted to prove he was brave enough, old enough, capable enough. So Christine reluctantly agreed. That morning, as Daniel climbed onto the bus, he clutched his stuffed bear, Mr. Buttons, that his grandmother had given him when he was born. He'd brought it just in case. Christine took a photo of him standing next to the bus, holding Mr. Buttons, smiling nervously. She still has that photo. It sits on her mantle, the last image of her son alive. Emma Patterson, Lucas Bennett, Sophia Kim, Nathan Cruz, Ava Thompson, Ethan Brooks, Mia Foster, Jackson Lee, Isabella Martinez, and Noah Campbell. Each one was somebody's whole world. Each one had a personality, a favorite color, a dream for the future, a quirky habit that made their family smile. Each one trusted that the adults in their lives would keep them safe. And then there were the 2 adults who got on that bus with them. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes was 42 years old, a science teacher at Pinewood for 15 years. She was beloved. There's no other word for it. Parents requested her class specifically. Former students came back to visit her years after graduating. She had a gift for making science feel like magic, for taking complicated concepts and making them accessible and exciting. She was married to David Hayes, a civil engineer, and they had 2 children of their own, both in high school. Eleanor was known for going above and beyond, staying late to help struggling students, organizing extra field trips and activities, writing college recommendation letters that were more like love letters to her students' potential. She was the kind of teacher who changed lives. Everyone in Millbrook trusted Eleanor Hayes completely. Robert Turner, known to everyone as Rob, was the bus driver, but he was much more than that. He was 38 years old, a former Marine who had served 2 tours in Iraq before coming home to Millbrook, his hometown. He was married with 3 young children. He'd been driving school buses for 5 years, and he took the job seriously. Rob was meticulous about safety, about following routes exactly, about making sure every child was accounted for. He was the kind of guy who, if your car broke down on the side of the road, would pull over to help. Parents liked Rob. Kids liked Rob. He was solid, dependable, trustworthy. The kind of man you'd trust with your children's lives without a second thought. On the morning of November 12, 2007, at exactly 8:47 a.m., bus number 47 pulled away from Pinewood Middle School. It was a clear, beautiful day. The temperature was 52 degrees. The sky was that perfect, crisp November blue. Parents stood in the parking lot, waving goodbye, taking photos, calling out reminders to be good and have fun. Some of them would later describe having an uneasy feeling, a strange sensation they couldn't quite name. but most were simply happy their children were going on an adventure. The bus was expected back at 4 p.m. It never returned. At 9:23 a.m., bus number 47 stopped at Morrison's gas station on the outskirts of Millbrook. This was a planned stop. Mrs. Hayes had arranged it in advance, so the kids could use the restroom and grab any last-minute snacks before the long drive to Cedar Mountain. The gas station security footage would later become some of the most analyzed video in the history of the case. You can see the bus pull in. You can see Mrs. Hayes stepping off first, doing a quick head count as children file off the bus in a somewhat chaotic line. You can see Marcus Williams laughing about something with Ethan Brooks. You can see Sarah Chun carrying a notebook, probably planning to take notes about the trip. You can see Daniel Morrison holding tight to Mr. Buttons. You can see Rob Turner leaning against the bus, arms crossed, smiling, keeping a watchful eye on the kids as they disappear into the gas station. The footage shows them inside the store. Kids buying candy, chips, soda. Mrs. Hayes buying a coffee. Someone, investigators think it was Olivia Rodriguez, helping a younger child count out coins to pay for a chocolate bar. Normal. Completely, utterly normal. At 9:23 a.m., everything was fine. Everyone was happy. Everyone was safe. By 9:38 a.m., they're back on the bus. You can see them loading up, see Mrs. Hayes doing another head count, see Rob climbing into the driver's seat. The bus pulls out of Morrison's gas station at 9:39 a.m., heading north. That was the last time anyone saw the Pinewood 14 alive. Here's what investigators would later piece together from various sources: GPS data from the bus, traffic cameras, cell phone records, and eventually, much later, from testimony that would come from the grave. Bus number 47 should have continued north on Highway 22 towards Cedar Mountain. It was a straight shot, about 45 miles, maybe an hour's drive. Rob Turner had driven that route before. He knew it well. There was no reason to deviate from it. But at 9:47 a.m., bus number 47 turned east onto Route 19. Route 19 is not on the way to Cedar Mountain. In fact, it goes in completely the opposite direction. Route 19 is a narrow, winding back road that cuts through rural farmland and eventually leads into dense forest. It's rarely used, maybe a handful of cars per day. There are no stores, no gas stations, no houses for long stretches. It's the kind of road locals know about, but outsiders would never find. It's the kind of road you'd take if you were trying to avoid being seen. At 9:47 a.m., Rob Turner deliberately turned onto Route 19. The GPS shows the turn was intentional, not accidental. The bus slowed down, signaled, made a clean right turn. At 10:12 a.m., the bus came to a complete stop on Route 19, approximately 34 miles from Pinewood Middle School. The GPS shows it sat there, engine running, for 7 minutes. At 10:19 a.m., the engine turned off. After that, nothing. No more GPS signals. No movement. Nothing. Back at Pinewood Middle School, nobody suspected anything was wrong. Not at first. Mrs. Hayes had told the office they'd be at Cedar Mountain all day, participating in the educational program, eating lunch at the picnic area, maybe doing some short hikes. Nobody expected to hear from them until they were on their way back. But at 4 p.m., when the bus didn't return, phones started ringing. The first call came from Sarah Chen's mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, at 4:15 p.m. She was a punctual person, and she'd expected to pick up Sarah right at 4 o'clock. When Sarah wasn't there, when the bus wasn't there, she called the school office. The secretary, Martha Williams, who happened to be Marcus Williams' aunt, said she was sure the bus was just running a few minutes late. Traffic, maybe. Or they'd lost track of time. Nothing to worry about. Give it another 15 minutes. By 4:30, 3 more parents had called. By 4:45, Principal Robert Garrett was calling Mrs. Hayes' cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. He called Rob Turner's cell phone. Same thing. Straight to voicemail. At 4:50 p.m., Principal Garrett called Cedar Mountain Nature Reserve. The ranger who answered the phone, a man named Dale Peterson, was confused by the call. "I'm sorry," he said. "What school group?" "We haven't had any groups here today." We've been expecting a group from Pinewood Middle School, but they never showed up. We figured the trip got canceled. That's when everything changed. Principal Garrett immediately called the Millbrook Police Department. At 5:02 p.m., the first patrol car was dispatched to begin looking for bus number 47. By 5:30 p.m., word had spread through Millbrook like wildfire. 14 children were missing. Parents began gathering at the school, their faces pale, their hands shaking, their minds racing through every terrible possibility. At 6:34 p.m., Officer Michael Santos found bus number 47. It was parked, if you could call it that, in a shallow ditch on Route 19, about 34 miles from Pinewood Middle School. The bus was partially hidden by overhanging tree branches, as if someone had tried to conceal it. The engine was cold. It had been sitting there for hours. The doors were open. Officer Santos approached carefully, his hand on his weapon, not knowing what he was about to find. He climbed the steps into the bus, his flashlight cutting through the dim interior. Empty. Completely empty. But not abandoned. That was the strange thing. It didn't look abandoned. 14 backpacks were arranged neatly in the seats, each one sitting upright, as if carefully placed. Mrs. Hayes' large canvas teacher bag sat in the front seat, her cell phone inside it, turned off. Her purse was there too, wallet, keys, everything. Rob Turner's lunch cooler sat on the dashboard where he always kept it. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no broken windows, no torn seats, nothing to suggest violence or panic. It looked like everyone had simply stood up and walked off the bus calmly, deliberately, leaving their belongings behind. But why? Where had they gone? And most terrifyingly, with whom? By 8 p.m. on November 12th, Millbrook was in full crisis mode. Every available police officer was called in. The Pennsylvania State Police were notified. Search and rescue teams were mobilized. Volunteers poured in from neighboring towns. By midnight, over 200 people were searching the woods around Route 19, calling out the children's names, shining flashlights into the darkness, praying to hear a response. 9 units were brought in. The dogs picked up scents leading away from the bus, but the trails went cold after a few hundred yards, as if the group had gotten into vehicles. But what vehicles? Officer Santos had been the first person to find the bus, and he'd seen no tire tracks besides the bus's own. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras flew over the area through the night, looking for heat signatures that might indicate people hiding or lost in the woods. They found nothing. By dawn on November 13th, the FBI had joined the investigation. Amber alerts were issued for all 14 children. Their photos were plastered across every news channel, every website, every social media platform. The faces of the Pinewood 14 became seared into the national consciousness. Sarah Chun, with her bright smile and purple jacket. Marcus Williams, with his gap-toothed grin. Olivia Rodriguez, with her serious, responsible expression. Daniel Morrison, clutching his stuffed bear. The search radius expanded to 50 miles. Then 100 miles. Roadblocks were set up. Every car leaving the area was stopped and searched. Abandoned buildings were checked. Waterways were dragged. Cave systems were explored. Nothing. It was as if 14 children and 2 adults had been plucked from existence, leaving behind only an empty bus and questions that had no answers. As the initial panic gave way to methodical investigation, FBI agents and state police detectives began examining every piece of evidence, every detail, every possible clue. What they found only deepened the mystery. First, there was the route itself. Why had Rob Turner taken Route 19? It made no sense. Rob was a careful driver, a former Marine who followed procedures and protocols. He knew the route to Cedar Mountain by heart. There was no logical reason for him to turn onto Route 19, which led away from their destination. Unless he was forced to. Unless someone was threatening him. Unless something had gone terribly wrong. But there was no evidence of a car chase, no reports of suspicious vehicles in the area, nothing to suggest Rob had been fleeing from danger or being followed. The GPS data showed the turn onto Route 19 was smooth, deliberate, controlled. not the turn of a panicked driver trying to escape a threat. Then there were the cell phones. This was 2007, so not every kid had a phone, but 6 of them did. So did Mrs. Hayes and Rob Turner. That's 8 phones total. Between 9:45 a.m. and 9:50 a.m., all 8 phones were turned off. Not dead, turned off. Someone had to physically power down each device. Mrs. Hayes' phone showed one last activity at 9:46 a.m., a text message to her husband, David. It read, "Running a bit behind schedule. Weather's beautiful. Talk soon. Love you." Nothing about the message suggested distress. No hidden meanings investigators could find. No coded plea for help. Just a normal text from a wife to her husband. After that, her phone was turned off. The phones of the 6 children who had them were all turned off within the same 5-minute window. The only way that made sense is if someone collected all the phones and turned them off systematically. But why would Mrs. Hayes or Rob do that? And if someone else was doing it, why would 14 children and 2 adults comply? Then there was the mystery of the security camera gap. Morrison's gas station had footage of the bus at 9:23 a.m., showing everyone safe and happy. The next traffic camera that should have caught the bus was at the intersection of Highway 22 and Route 19, about 15 miles north of Morrison's. That camera saw dozens of vehicles that morning between 9:30 and 10 a.m. But it never saw bus number 47. How was that possible? The bus had to pass that intersection to get to Route 19. But it simply wasn't on the footage. It was as if the bus had turned invisible for a crucial 24-minute window. Unless it had taken an alternate route. There was an old logging road that connected from a side street near Morrison's to Route 19, bypassing the main intersection entirely. The logging road was barely maintained, rough and overgrown, but a school bus could navigate it if the driver was determined enough. But again, why? Why would Rob Turner take a rough logging road to access a back road that led away from their destination? Nothing made sense. The FBI brought in behavioral analysts to create profiles of both Mrs. Hayes and Rob Turner. Could this be a case of planned abduction by a trusted adult? Had one or both of them been planning this? Deep background checks revealed nothing suspicious. Mrs. Hayes had no financial troubles, no mental health red flags, no secret life that investigators could find. Her bank accounts were normal. Her internet search history showed science lesson plans and family vacation ideas. Her friends and family all said the same thing. Eleanor was devoted to her students, devoted to her own children, devoted to her husband. She would never hurt anyone. Rob Turner's background was equally clean. Military service, honorable discharge, decorated for valor in Iraq. Financial records, stable. Marriage, by all accounts, happy. His wife, Jennifer, was adamant. Rob would die before letting anything happen to those kids. He would die protecting them. She had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. The FBI considered every angle. Kidnapping for ransom? But no ransom demand came. Not in the first 24 hours. Not in the first week. Not ever. Human trafficking? The idea made parents physically sick, but investigators had to consider it. Yet there was no evidence, no indication of trafficking networks operating in the area. Cult activity? There were unsubstantiated rumors of a cult that had operated in rural Pennsylvania in the 1990s. Investigators chased down every lead, interviewed former members, searched old properties. Nothing connected to Pinewood. Random abduction by a predator? But how would a predator overpower 2 adults and 14 children ranging in age from 9 to 12? How would they transport 16 people? Where would they take them? Every theory had holes. Every lead went nowhere. Every potential answer raised 10 new questions. As days turned into weeks with no answers, Millbrook began to tear itself apart from the inside. Some people believed Mrs. Hayes and Rob Turner were victims, that someone had ambushed them on Route 19, forced them off the road, taken them hostage. These people held vigils for all 16 missing individuals, praying for their safe return. Others began to whisper that maybe Mrs. Hayes or Rob or both were responsible. Maybe this was planned. Maybe they'd been grooming these kids for months. Maybe they'd taken them somewhere for dark purposes nobody wanted to voice out loud. Suspicion spread like poison. Rumors sprouted like weeds. People started looking at their neighbors differently, wondering who could be trusted, questioning everything they thought they knew. David Hayes, Eleanor's husband, became a target of speculation. Some people wondered if he'd been involved, if he'd helped his wife plan this. He couldn't walk down the street without feeling eyes on him. His children were bullied at school, accused of having a monster for a mother. Jennifer Turner, Rob's wife, faced similar treatment. People whispered that she must have known something, must have suspected something. She stopped going to the grocery store because she couldn't stand the stares, the whispers that went quiet when she walked past. The parents of the missing children formed an organization called Bring Them Home Foundation. They held weekly meetings, coordinated search efforts, pushed for more media coverage, begged the FBI to do more, to try harder, to not give up. Some marriages couldn't survive the strain. Within the first year, 3 sets of parents divorced. The grief was too heavy, the unknown too crushing. Some people needed to keep searching frantically, desperately, every single day. Others needed to try to move forward, to create some semblance of normal life for their surviving children. Those differences became chasms. Dr. Lisa Chen, Sarah's mother, never stopped searching. Every weekend for years, she'd go to the woods around Route 19 with a group of volunteers, walking grid patterns, looking for any sign of her daughter. She'd come home covered in mud and scratches, exhausted, heartbroken, but determined. She'd go out again the next weekend. Marcus Williams' father, James, spiraled into alcoholism. He'd been a high school basketball coach, beloved and respected. Within 2 years, he'd lost his job, his marriage, his house. He'd sit at the bar downtown every night, talking about Marcus to anyone who'd listen, showing strangers photos on his phone, asking if they'd seen his boy. By year 5, he was living in his car. By year 8, he was dead from liver failure at age 48. Daniel Morrison's parents, Christine and Robert, divorced after 3 years. Robert moved to Colorado, trying to escape the pain. Christine stayed in Millbrook, keeping Daniel's room exactly as he'd left it, replacing Mr. Buttons on his pillow every morning, unable to accept that her youngest child was gone. Olivia Rodriguez's parents closed their restaurant. They couldn't bear to serve the community anymore, couldn't stand to see the faces of the people whose children were safe at home while their daughter was God knows where, suffering God knows what. The community that had once been tight-knit and trusting became fractured and suspicious. Millbrook was dying slowly, poisoned by unanswered questions and unresolved grief. In those early months and years, law enforcement focused on several suspects. Each time, hope would rise. Each time, that hope would be crushed. The first was Gerald Finch, a 56-year-old man who lived in a small cabin near Route 19. Gerald was what people called a loner. He kept to himself, didn't socialize, had a criminal record, breaking and entering in 1989, assault in 1995. He'd served time for both. When police searched his property 3 days after the disappearance, they found nothing. No evidence of children being held there, no suspicious items, nothing that connected him to the case. But the absence of evidence didn't satisfy some people. The whispers started. The accusations. Gerald Finch's life became a living hell. People drove by his property screaming at him. Someone spray-painted child killer on his cabin. He received death threats. The police had to post a car outside his property for his protection. Gerald maintained his innocence, but nobody believed him. In April 2008, 6 months after the disappearance, Gerald Finch wrote a note that read, "I didn't take those kids. But the Pinewood 14 destroyed my life anyway. I can't live like this anymore. I'm sorry for the pain everyone is in. I wish I could help, but I can't." He put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. His suicide note was examined by experts who concluded it was genuine, that it showed no signs of hidden guilt, that Gerald Finch was, in all likelihood, innocent. He was just a convenient target for a community desperate to blame someone. The second major suspect was David Pullman, a former 5th grade teacher at Pinewood who'd been fired 6 months before the disappearance. David was 34 years old, charismatic, popular with students. Too popular, it turned out. He'd been reported by Mrs. Eleanor Hayes for having an inappropriate relationship with a 14-year-old student. The relationship was deemed inappropriate, but not quite criminal. No physical contact, but too many private conversations, too many gifts, too much attention that crossed professional boundaries. David was fired. He was humiliated. He blamed Eleanor Hayes for ruining his life. So when the Pinewood 14 vanished, naturally investigators looked at David Pullman. He became their primary suspect for months. He had motive, revenge against Eleanor. He had opportunity. He knew the school, knew the kids, knew the area. His alibi for November 12th was shaky at first. He claimed he'd been home alone, which couldn't be verified. Then, under pressure, his alibi completely fell apart. Investigators discovered he'd lied about his whereabouts. In January 2008, David Pullman confessed. "I did something terrible," he said in the interrogation room, his head in his hands. "I can't live with myself anymore. I need to tell the truth." The media exploded. Parents gathered at the police station. This was it. Finally, answers. Finally, someone to punish. Finally, they'd know what happened to their babies. Except David Pullman hadn't taken the children. His confession was for insurance fraud. He'd been trying to stage a car accident to collect insurance money, and his conscience had gotten the better of him. He had nothing to do with the Pinewood 14. The disappointment was crushing. Hope had risen so high, only to be demolished completely. This pattern would repeat several times over the years. A suspect would emerge. Hope would rise. The lead would go nowhere. Despair would deepen. The first anniversary of the disappearance, November 12, 2008, was marked by a massive vigil in downtown Millbrook. Over 3,000 people attended, holding candles, praying, weeping. The parents of the Pinewood 14 stood on a stage, holding framed photographs of their children, begging anyone with information to come forward. "Please," Christine Morrison said, her voice breaking. "If you know anything, anything at all, tell us. We just want to bring them home. We just want to lay them to rest." The not knowing is worse than death. Those words haunted the community. The not knowing. The endless, agonizing not knowing. By year 2, the FBI had interviewed over 2,300 people. They'd chased down over 1,800 tips and leads. They'd searched hundreds of properties, dug up dozens of sites based on tips from psychics and dreamers and people who swore they had visions. They'd found nothing. The case file grew to 47,000 pages. Mountains of evidence that led nowhere. Oceans of testimony that proved nothing. The Bring Them Home Foundation hired private investigators, psychics, cadaver dog handlers, anyone who might help. They raised money through bake sales and car washes and donation drives. Some people gave generously, wanting to help. Others grew weary of the constant fundraising, the constant reminders of the tragedy. By year 3, media coverage had mostly dried up. The Pinewood 14 were still remembered, still mentioned on anniversary dates, but they were no longer headline news. The country had moved on to newer tragedies, fresher mysteries. But the families couldn't move on. How could they? Dr. Lisa Chin, Sarah's mother, developed a routine. Every Saturday, she'd pack a lunch and drive to the woods near Route 19. She'd walk for hours, looking for any sign, a scrap of purple fabric from Sarah's jacket, a bone, anything. She'd come home as the sun set, empty-handed, but unable to stop herself from going back the next weekend. Her husband, Dr. Michael Chun, begged her to stop. "You're killing yourself," he said. "Sarah wouldn't want this for you. But what if she's out there?" Lisa would respond. "What if she's waiting for me to find her? What if I give up and she was just 1 more mile away?" There was no arguing with that logic. How do you give up on your child? How do you stop searching? Marcus Williams' family fractured completely. His father's alcoholism destroyed everything. His mother, Patricia, tried to hold the family together, but it was like trying to hold water in her hands. His 4 siblings struggled in school, struggled with depression, struggled with survivor's guilt. Why them? Why did they get to be safe when Marcus didn't? Olivia Rodriguez's parents closed their restaurant and moved to Texas, trying to escape the pain. But you can't outrun grief. It follows you. It lives inside you. They start to feel okay, start to rebuild, and then they'd see a girl about the age Olivia would have been, and everything would collapse again. Daniel Morrison's room stayed exactly as he left it. Mr. Buttons on the pillow. Posters of astronauts on the walls. A half-completed puzzle on the desk. Christine couldn't bring herself to change anything. She'd sit in his room sometimes, just sit there in the silence, trying to feel close to him. By year 5, 2012, some of the parents had started to talk about acceptance. Not forgetting, never forgetting, but accepting that they might never know. That they might never get answers. That they might have to learn to live with the questions. Others refused. "I'll search until the day I die," Lisa Chen said. And she meant it. As the case went cold, as official investigation efforts slowed, the internet picked up the slack. True crime forums, Reddit threads, YouTube channels, podcasts, everyone had a theory about what happened to the Pinewood 14. Some theories were well-researched and plausible. Others were completely insane. But people couldn't stop speculating, couldn't stop trying to solve the unsolvable. Theory 1. Underground trafficking ring. This theory held that the Pinewood 14 had been specifically targeted by a sophisticated human trafficking organization. Proponents of this theory pointed to the organized nature of the disappearance, the deliberate route change, the systematic powering down of cell phones, the lack of evidence at the scene. They claimed this was the work of professionals who'd done this before. Some even claimed to have identified the bus on dark web forums where children were auctioned to the highest bidder. Law enforcement investigated these claims extensively. Every supposed lead turned out to be fabricated or misidentified. There was no evidence of trafficking networks operating in Pennsylvania at that time. No evidence that the Pinewood 14 had been targeted specifically. No evidence that any of them had been sold or transported across state lines. But the theory persisted because it offered an explanation, however horrible, for what had happened. Theory 2, cult abduction. In the 1990s, there had been rumors of a cult operating in rural Pennsylvania, allegedly involved in ritualistic activities. Former members had come forward with stories of brainwashing, of being forced to participate in ceremonies. When the Pinewood 14 vanished, some people connected it to the cult. Maybe the cult was still active. Maybe they needed fresh victims. Maybe Mrs. Hayes and Rob Turner had been members. Investigators tracked down every person who'd ever been associated with the alleged cult. They searched properties. They interviewed dozens of people. The conclusion: the cult stories were largely exaggerated. The group in question had been more of a commune than a dangerous cult, and it had disbanded years before 2007. There was zero evidence connecting them to the Pinewood 14. Theory 3. Government cover-up. This theory suggested that the disappearance was connected to a classified military or government operation. About 40 miles from Millbrook was a military base. Some theorists claimed there had been a chemical spill or a test gone wrong on November 12, 2007, and that the Pinewood 14 had somehow been exposed. The government, desperate to cover up the incident, had made them disappear. Freedom of Information Act requests were filed. Documents were obtained. There was no chemical spill, no classified test, no government involvement. But again, the theory persisted because conspiracy theories don't require evidence. They require a worldview where powerful forces can make people vanish without consequences. Theory 4. Paranormal activity. Route 19, according to some, passed through an area with high electromagnetic activity, a so-called energy vortex, where strange things happened. Some people claimed they'd experienced time loss on Route 19, or had seen strange lights, or felt inexplicable dread. The theory went that the Pinewood 14 had driven through some kind of dimensional portal or time slip, and were now trapped in another reality. This theory was investigated by paranormal enthusiasts, not law enforcement. Teams with EMF readers and cameras spent nights on Route 19, looking for evidence of supernatural activity. They found nothing unusual. The energy vortex was, as far as anyone could tell, just a regular road through the woods. Theory 5. They're still alive. This was the cruelest theory because it gave false hope. Every few months, someone would come forward claiming to have seen one of the Pinewood 14. I saw Olivia Rodriguez at a Walmart in Ohio, or Marcus Williams is working at a gas station in Nevada, or Sarah Chun is a student at UCLA. I'm sure it's her. Every single one of these sightings was investigated. Every single one turned out to be a case of mistaken identity or outright fabrication. But each time, parents' hearts would leap with hope, only to be crushed again when the lead evaporated. The theories multiplied and evolved, becoming more elaborate and more disconnected from reality. But they all served the same purpose. They were attempts to impose meaning on meaninglessness, to create narrative where there was only void. By the 10-year anniversary in 2017, something had shifted in Millbrook. The town had learned to live with its wound. The vigils still happened, but they were smaller. The media coverage was minimal, just local news, a brief mention on the anniversary date. Some of the families had left Millbrook, unable to bear living in a place that reminded them constantly of their loss. Others stayed, unable to leave, feeling that leaving would be abandoning their children somehow. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes' husband, David, had remarried and moved to Maryland. He gave an interview on the 10-year anniversary. Eleanor was a good person, he said. Whatever happened to her, whatever happened to those children, it wasn't because she wanted to hurt anyone. I believe that with everything I am. But I've had to move on. I've had to build a new life. I'll always love Eleanor, and I'll always wonder what happened, but I can't let it consume me anymore. Rob Turner's wife, Jennifer, had a different perspective. I haven't moved on, she said in the same documentary. I see Rob in my dreams. Almost every night. Sometimes he's trying to tell me something, but I can't understand him. Other times he just holds me and tells me he's sorry. Sorry for what? For dying? For leaving me? For whatever happened that day. I wake up more confused than when I went to sleep. The children who would have been the Pinewood 14 would have been adults now. Marcus Williams would be 28 years old. Olivia Rodriguez would be 30. What kind of adults would they have become? What careers would they have chosen? Would they have married? Had children of their own? These were the questions that haunted the parents. Not just what happened, but what could have been. Sarah Chen's mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, finally stopped her weekly searches in 2019, 12 years after the disappearance. Not because she'd given up hope, but because her body couldn't do it anymore. She developed severe arthritis in her knees from all those years walking rough terrain. She physically couldn't continue. She described it as a relief and a betrayal all at once. Part of me is glad I have an excuse to stop, she admitted in a support group meeting. I was killing myself doing those searches. But now I feel like I've failed Sarah. Like I've given up on her. You haven't given up, another parent told her. You've done more than anyone should ever have to do. You've done enough. But when does grief ever feel like enough has been done? By 2022, 15 years after the disappearance, a new detective was assigned to review the case. Her name was Jennifer Rodriguez, no relation to Olivia, though she was constantly reminded of the coincidence. Jennifer had a reputation as someone who could look at cold cases with fresh eyes, who could see patterns others missed. She spent 6 months going through the 47,000-page case file. She re-interviewed witnesses who were still alive and willing to talk. She looked at evidence with new technologies that hadn't existed in 2007. She created new timelines, new maps, new theories. In the end, she came to the same conclusion as every detective before her. There simply wasn't enough evidence to solve the case. Whatever had happened to the Pinewood 14, the answer had gone to the grave with them. Unless something new emerged, some piece of physical evidence, some deathbed confession, some miracle, the case would remain unsolved forever. I'm sorry, Detective Rodriguez told the families in early 2024. I wish I had better news. But I've done everything I can, and I just don't have answers for you. Some families accepted this. They'd already accepted it years ago. Others raged against it. How could the answer be, we'll never know? How was that acceptable? How was that justice? 2024 turned into 2025. 17 years since the disappearance. The Pinewood 14 were becoming a historical footnote, a tragic mystery that would likely never be solved. True crime enthusiasts still discuss the case online, but even that had slowed. There were only so many times you could rehash the same evidence, theorize the same theories, come to the same dead ends. The families were aging. Some had health problems. Some had died. Sarah Chen's mother, Lisa, passed away in January 2025 from heart failure. She was only 58. The doctor said it was a heart attack, but everyone knew she died of a broken heart, worn down by years of grief and searching and never knowing. In February 2025, the Millbrook Police Department received an anonymous letter. It was handwritten, postmarked from Millbrook itself. The letter read, "I know what happened to the Pinewood 14. Meet me at the old Miller farm on Route 19, March 1st at midnight. Come alone, or you'll never know the truth." This was not the first such letter. Over the years, there had been dozens of hoax letters, prank calls, false confessions. But Detective Rodriguez had to check it out. It was her job. It was what the families deserved. On March 1st, 2025, at midnight, Detective Rodriguez set up a sting operation at the old Miller farm. 50 officers were positioned around the area, hidden, waiting. The media wasn't told. They couldn't risk tipping off whoever sent the letter. Midnight came and went. Nobody showed up. It was, as expected, another hoax. Another cruel joke. Another false hope, raised and dashed. Detective Rodriguez went home at 2 a.m., exhausted and disappointed, but not surprised. She'd almost expected it to be nothing. But something was about to break. In exactly 7 days, the truth would finally begin to emerge. Not from an informant, not from a confession, but from a hiker who would stumble upon something that had been hidden in the woods for 18 years. Something that would crack open the case and reveal a truth so shocking, so heartbreaking, so unthinkable, that it would change everything. James Kowalski was 29 years old, an experienced hiker who loved exploring off-trail areas of Pennsylvania forests. He was the kind of person who got restless following marked paths, who wanted to see places other people didn't see, who pushed boundaries and explored the unexplored. On March 8, 2025, James was hiking through Blackwood Forest Preserve, a dense stretch of woodland about 60 miles northeast of Millbrook. It was a place few people visited. The terrain was rough, the woods were thick, and there were no maintained trails. Perfect for someone like James who wanted solitude and adventure. At 2:34 p.m., James saw something that didn't belong. A glint of metal in the undergrowth, partially covered by years of fallen leaves and forest debris. His curiosity pulled him toward it. As he got closer, he realized it was some kind of metal box, approximately 2 feet by 2 feet, partially buried in the ground. The box was rusted, but intact. There had been a padlock on it once, but time and the elements had broken it off. James knelt down and, with some effort, pried open the lid. Inside was a collection of items that made his blood run cold. Even before he fully understood what he was looking at, some primal part of his brain recognized that this was important, that this was evidence of something terrible. There were 14 student ID cards from Pinewood Middle School, each one bearing the photo and name of one of the Pinewood 14. Sarah Chun, Marcus Williams, Olivia Rodriguez, Daniel Morrison, all of them. There was Mrs. Eleanor Hayes' driver's license, her photo staring up from the plastic card, her smile frozen in time. There was Robert Turner's military ID from his time in the Marines, his younger face serious and proud. There was a journal water-damaged but still readable, with EH written on the cover in what looked like Eleanor Hayes' handwriting. There was a disposable camera, the kind from 2007, with film still inside. There was a USB drive, modern, not something from 2007, which meant someone had added this item to the box recently. There was a newspaper clipping about the Pinewood 14 disappearance, yellowed with age. And there was a note, written in shaky handwriting. "I'm sorry. God forgive me. EH." James Kowalski's hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone and called 911. "I think I found something related to the Pinewood 14, he said. "You need to get here right now." Within 3 hours, Blackwood Forest Preserve was swarming with law enforcement. FBI agents, state police, forensic specialists, cadaver dogs, and Detective Jennifer Rodriguez, who'd been the one to receive the call. The location was significant. Blackwood Forest Preserve was 60 miles from Millbrook and 73 miles from where bus number 47 had been found on Route 19. It was outside the original search radius. It had never been searched during the initial investigation. The box and its contents were carefully photographed, cataloged, and transported to a forensic lab. Every item would be analyzed for DNA, fingerprints, any trace evidence that might provide answers. But the journal couldn't wait. Detective Rodriguez, wearing gloves, carefully opened it and began to read. The journal was Eleanor Hayes' handwriting. That was confirmed by handwriting analysis within hours. It contained entries dated from November 12th through November 15th, 2007. 4 days. The first 4 days after the disappearance. The entries were disturbing, cryptic, heartbreaking. Let me read you some of them. November 12th, 2007, 11:30 a.m. I don't know how to explain what I've done. The children are scared. Rob is helping me, but I can see the doubt in his eyes. We've gone too far to turn back now. This was the only way. When I discovered what Thomas was planning, I panicked. I couldn't let him take these babies. I couldn't let him hurt them the way he hurt the others. So Rob and I made a plan. We'd take them somewhere safe, get evidence, expose him. But he found out. God help us, he found out. November 13th, 2007. Unknown time. One of the children asked if they're going to die. I couldn't answer. I don't know anymore. Thomas has a gun. He's hunting them. We tried to save them, and we've doomed them instead. What have I done? What kind of monster am I? These children trusted me. November 14th, 2007, unknown time. Rob is gone. Thomas shot him. I watched him die trying to protect the children. The kids scattered into the woods. I told them to run, to hide, to find help. But this forest goes on forever and there's no one out here. Thomas is tracking them one by one. I can hear gunshots in the distance. How many has he found? How many are still alive? November 15th, 2007, final entry tomorrow. If I'm still alive, I'll try to make it out of these woods and tell the truth. But I don't think Thomas will let me live. I think he's going to find me like he found the children. To whoever finds this, I am not a monster. I swear I'm not. I was trying to save them from someone far worse. Look deeper into Millbrook. Look at Thomas Brennan. He's been hurting children for years and nobody stopped him. Nobody believed. And now 14 children are dead because I tried to save them in the wrong way. God forgive me. Tell their parents I'm sorry. Tell them I tried. That's where the journal ended. Thomas Brennan. The name sent investigators scrambling. Who was Thomas Brennan? Within an hour, they had the answer. Thomas Brennan had been a fifth-grade teacher at Pinewood Middle School from 1995 to 2007. He'd left teaching shortly after the Pinewood 14 disappeared, citing health reasons. He'd moved to Florida in 2010. He was now 73 years old, living in a retirement community near Tampa. Or, at least, he had been. While investigators were running background checks on Thomas Brennan, forensic specialists were examining the USB drive found in the box. It was a modern drive, probably manufactured within the last 5 years, which meant it had been added to the box long after the events of 2007. The drive contained several files. Scanned documents from 2007, what appeared to be printed internet searches about how to hide crimes, how to dispose of bodies, how to cover tracks. The kind of searches a guilty person might make. Photos of all 14 children from before they vanished. School photos, candid shots, images that looked like they'd been collected over time by someone who'd been watching these kids. And a video file dated March 1st, 2025, exactly 1 week earlier. The file was titled The Truth About Pinewood. Detective Rodriguez pulled up the video. What she saw and heard made her feel physically ill. The video showed a figure in a hooded sweatshirt sitting in what looked like a living room. The hood obscured most of the face. The voice was electronically distorted, made deeper and more robotic to prevent identification. But the words were clear. The figure began to speak. My name doesn't matter. In a few days, I'll be dead anyway. What matters is the truth. The truth about what happened to the Pinewood 14. The truth about Eleanor Hayes. The truth about me. Eleanor Hayes didn't kidnap those children. She was saving them. Saving them from me. My name was Thomas Brennan. I taught 5th grade at Pinewood Middle School for 12 years. And for 8 of those years, I was a predator. I sexually abused children. Dozens of them. Boys and girls. Some as young as 8 years old. I groomed them, manipulated them, threatened them, hurt them. And I got away with it because people trust teachers. Because I was good at my job. Because I was charming and friendly and everyone thought I was wonderful. The Pinewood 14 were going to be my next victims. All 14 of them. I'd volunteered to chaperone that field trip to Cedar Mountain. I'd rented a cabin in the woods where I planned to take them. All of them. One final score before I disappeared and started over somewhere else. But Eleanor Hayes found out. In early November 2007, she borrowed my school computer to work on a presentation. I'd forgotten to log out of my personal folder. She saw photos. Evidence of what I'd done. Photos of children I'd hurt over the years. She confronted me. She threatened to go to the police. I told her she had no proof that would hold up in court. I'd been very careful. I told her I'd destroy her career, her reputation, her family if she tried to expose me. And I told her something else. I told her I was going on that Cedar Mountain field trip and there was nothing she could do to stop me. Eleanor panicked. She couldn't let me take those kids. So she came up with a desperate plan. She convinced Rob Turner, the bus driver who she'd confided in, to help her. On the morning of November 12th, instead of driving to Cedar Mountain, they diverted the bus to Route 19. They were going to take the kids to a safe place, gather more evidence on me, then go to the police with something they could actually prosecute. But I found out about the plan. I followed them in my car. I found them on Route 19, where they'd stopped the bus. I confronted them. I had a gun. I told Eleanor I would kill every child right there on that bus unless she got in my car. Rob tried to be a hero. He tried to fight me. So I shot him. I shot him in the chest and watched him die on the side of the road. The gunshot sent the kids into a panic. They ran off the bus in every direction, scattering into the woods. Eleanor was screaming, begging me to let them go. But they'd seen too much. They could identify me. So I told Eleanor to come with me, or I'd hunt down every single one of those children and kill them. She got in my car. Over the next 3 days, I tracked those kids through Blackwood Forest. It wasn't hard. They were just children, scared, lost, alone, exhausted. They had no food, no water, no idea where they were or how to get help. I found all 14 of them, one by one, and I killed all 14. I shot them and I buried them in separate locations throughout these woods, deep enough that they'd never be found. I burned their clothes. I destroyed evidence. I made sure there was nothing to trace back to me. I kept Eleanor alive until the end. I made her watch what her rescue attempt had caused. Then I shot her too. Rob Turner I buried in a shallow grave near Route 19. The others I scattered throughout Blackwood. I knew this forest. I'd hiked it for years. I knew spots nobody would ever search. Then I went back to Millbrook and acted like I knew nothing. I taught school for another 4 months, watching the investigation, watching the parents grieve, watching the community tear itself apart. Then I retired, claiming health issues. I moved to Florida in 2010. I got married. I became a grandfather. I lived a normal, peaceful life. But Eleanor was right about one thing. I couldn't live with it forever. The guilt grew every year. The nightmares got worse. I started seeing their faces. Sarah Chun asking me why. Marcus Williams crying for his mother. Little Daniel Morrison clutching that stupid stuffed bear even as I pulled the trigger. 73 years old and I can't sleep anymore. I can't eat. I can't look at my grandchildren without thinking about the children I murdered. So I'm leaving this confession. I've included GPS coordinates for all 16 burial sites on this drive. Bring them home. Give their families the closure I never deserved to have. Eleanor Hayes was a hero. She saw evil and she tried to stop it. She failed, but she tried. That's more than most people do. I was the monster. I am the monster. And by the time you find this, I'll be dead. I'm ending my life because I don't deserve to live any longer. I don't deserve a trial, a defense, mercy. I deserve hell, and I hope that's exactly where I'm going. Tell the families I'm sorry. I know it means nothing, but I'm sorry. The video ended. Detective Rodriguez sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and called the Tampa Police Department. I need you to do a welfare check on a Thomas Brennan, she said. And when you find him, I need you to secure his property as a crime scene. I'll explain everything, but we need to move fast. Tampa police found Thomas Brennan in his home 3 hours later. He was dead. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. He'd been dead for approximately 1 week. The autopsy would later confirm he died on March 1st, 2025, the same date as the hoax letter to the Millbrook Police Department. Investigators searching his property found evidence that validated his confession. Journals going back to the 1990s detailing his abuse of children. Photos, hundreds of photos, of victims over the years. Notes describing fantasies, plans, methods. It was a horrifying archive of decades of predation. The FBI launched a comprehensive investigation into Thomas Brennan's entire teaching career. They identified schools where he'd worked before Pinewood, found potential victims, reached out to them. 32 people came forward. 32 individuals who said Thomas Brennan had sexually abused them when they were children in his classes. The oldest victim was now in their 40s. The youngest, aside from the Pinewood 14 who hadn't survived, was in their 20s. 32 lives damaged, and 14 lives ended. Thomas Brennan had been a predator hiding in plain sight for over 20 years. He'd been Teacher of the Year twice. Parents had requested their children be placed in his class. The community had loved him, trusted him, never suspected him. Eleanor Hayes had seen what he was. She tried to stop him, and she died for it. The USB drive contained GPS coordinates for 16 burial sites scattered throughout Blackwood Forest Preserve. 16 sets of remains that had been hidden for 18 years. Beginning on March 10, 2025, forensic teams began the heartbreaking work of recovery. Sarah Chun was found on March 12, 65 feet from a large oak tree, exactly where the coordinates indicated. Her remains were in a shallow grave, 3 feet deep. Forensics confirmed the cause of death. Single gunshot wound to the chest. Marcus Williams was found on March 15th. Gunshot wound to the head. Olivia Rodriguez was found on March 18th. Gunshot wound to the back. Daniel Morrison was found on March 21st. The recovery team wept when they found him. His skeletal remains still held fragments of fabric that had once been Mr. Button's, the stuffed bear he'd clutched as he died. One by one, over the course of 3 weeks, all 14 children were recovered. Each discovery was announced publicly. Each time, parents who'd waited 18 years finally received confirmation of what they'd always feared but never wanted to believe. Their children were dead, had been dead since November 2007, had died terrified and alone in the woods, hunted by a monster who'd spent years winning their trust. Eleanor Hayes was found on April 1st. The coordinates placed her near the center of the forest, furthest from any trail. Thomas Brennan had written in his confession that he'd killed her last, that he'd made her watch the aftermath of her failed rescue attempt. Her remains showed she'd been shot twice, once in the abdomen, once in the head. The first shot to make her suffer, the second to finish her. Robert Turner was found on April 3rd near Route 19, exactly where Thomas Brennan said he'd left him. Rob had been shot trying to protect the children. He'd died a hero, though nobody had known it until now. All 16 sets of remains were transported to the State Forensic Lab, processed, identified through DNA, and eventually released to their families for burial. May 2025 will be remembered in Millbrook as the month of farewells. 14 funerals for 14 children who'd been missing for 18 years. 2 funerals for 2 adults who died trying to save them. The first funeral was for Daniel Morrison the youngest victim. His parents, Christine and Robert, long divorced but united in grief, stood together at the graveside. Christine held Mr. Buttons, or what remained of him, carefully preserved by forensic specialists. She'd asked to have it back. She wanted to bury her son with a bear he'd loved. "I thought the not knowing was the worst part," Christine said in her eulogy. "I was wrong. Knowing is worse. Knowing he was scared and alone and calling for me, and I couldn't help him. That's worse than anything I imagined." Sarah Chen's funeral was held on May 10th. Her father, Dr. Michael Chen, spoke. Her mother, Dr. Lisa Chun, who'd spent 12 years searching the woods every weekend, was not there. She died 3 months earlier, her heart finally giving out from years of grief. But Michael believed Lisa knew, somehow, that Sarah had been found. "She can rest now," he said. "They both can." Marcus Williams' funeral was attended by over 1,000 people. His father, James, who died from alcoholism years earlier, wasn't there to see his son finally laid to rest. But his mother, Patricia, and his 4 siblings were there. One of his brothers, now 35 years old, spoke about growing up in the shadow of Marcus's disappearance, about how it had shaped every aspect of his life. "We're finally saying goodbye," he said. "But part of me wishes we'd never found him. Is that horrible to say? Because at least when he was missing, there was hope. Now there's just nothing." Olivia Rodriguez's funeral was the largest. Her parents, who'd moved to Texas years ago, had returned to Millbrook for this. They stood at her grave and apologized for leaving, for giving up, for not being there when her remains were found. "We're sorry, Mija," her father said. "We're so sorry." Eleanor Hayes' funeral was complicated. Some people in Millbrook saw her as a hero who tried to save the children. Others blamed her for getting them killed. The truth, as always, was more complex than either narrative. David Hayes, her ex-husband who'd remarried, spoke at her funeral. "Eleanor wasn't perfect," he said. "She made a terrible mistake in how she tried to handle the situation. But her heart was in the right place. She saw evil and she tried to stop it. Most people just look away. Eleanor didn't look away. That took courage, even if it ended in tragedy." Robert Turner's funeral honored him as the hero he was. He'd fought against a man with a gun to protect children. He died trying to save them. The Marines sent an honor guard. His wife, Jennifer, finally had closure after 18 years of not knowing. "I used to dream that Rob was trying to tell me something," she said. "Now I know what he was trying to say. He was saying he fought. He was saying he didn't give up. He was saying he loved those kids, and he died protecting them. I can finally let him rest." The town of Millbrook held a collective memorial service on May 31st. All 16 names were read aloud. Their photos were displayed. Their memories were honored. The mayor spoke about the importance of vigilance, of believing victims, of not ignoring signs of abuse. He announced that Pinewood Middle School would be renamed Eleanor Hayes Middle School in honor of the woman who tried to save them. The community wept together, grieved together, and began the long process of healing together. The Pinewood 14 case didn't just solve one mystery. It revealed systemic failures that had allowed Thomas Brennan to abuse children for over 2 decades without being caught. In November 2025, Pennsylvania passed the Eleanor Hayes Act, a comprehensive piece of legislation designed to protect children and support whistleblowers who report abuse. Key provisions included mandatory reporting improvements, requiring teachers who suspect abuse to report immediately to both school administration and law enforcement simultaneously, eliminating the possibility of school cover-ups. Enhanced protection for whistleblowers, making it illegal to retaliate against employees who report suspected abuse, with significant penalties for violations. More thorough background checks for teachers, including psychological evaluations and regular rescreening. Mandatory training for all school staff on recognizing signs of abuse and proper reporting procedures. Within 6 months, 12 other states had passed similar legislation. The Eleanor Hayes Act became a model for child protection nationwide. The FBI launched a national investigation into Thomas Brennan's victims. They identified 47 individuals who'd been abused by Brennan over his teaching career. 8 of them were still alive and came forward to share their stories. A victims' compensation fund was established to provide counseling and support services. In Millbrook, a memorial garden was created at Eleanor Hayes Middle School, featuring 16 trees, one for each victim, and a bronze plaque with all their names. Every November 12th, the anniversary of the disappearance, the community gathers there to remember. Annual See Something, Say Something awareness days were established, reminding community members that reporting suspicions of abuse could save lives. The Bring Them Home Foundation, which had spent 18 years searching for the Pinewood 14, transformed into a new organization focused on child safety, abuse prevention, and supporting families of missing children. They now work nationally, helping other families navigate the nightmare of having a missing child. The Pinewood 14 case changed Millbrook forever. The town that had once been defined by trust and innocence was forced to confront the reality that monsters can hide anywhere, that evil doesn't announce itself, that the people we trust most can sometimes be the people we should fear. But the case also revealed something else, that ordinary people can be heroes. Eleanor Hayes saw something wrong and tried to stop it, even though it cost her everything. Rob Turner fought a man with a gun to protect children. Both of them died in the attempt, but their courage led, eventually, to justice and systemic change. The families of the Pinewood 14 finally have closure. It's not the closure they wanted. Nobody wants to bury their child. But after 18 years of not knowing, of imagining worst-case scenarios, of holding onto impossible hope, they finally have answers. They finally have a grave to visit. They finally know the truth. The truth is this. 14 children went on a school trip on November 12, 2007. They were supposed to learn about nature, collect rocks, and make memories. Instead, they became victims of one man's evil and unwitting symbols of one woman's desperate heroism. Sarah Chun never became a marine biologist. Marcus Williams never got to share his photos. Olivia Rodriguez never got to graduate high school. Daniel Morrison never outgrew his anxiety. The other 10 children never got to grow up at all. Eleanor Hayes never got to see her own children graduate, get married, have families of their own. Rob Turner never got to watch his 3 kids grow up. But their deaths, as tragic and senseless as they were, led to changes that will protect countless other children. The Eleanor Hayes Act has already prevented abuse in dozens of schools. The increased awareness has led to earlier intervention in cases of suspected abuse. Thomas Brennan's victims from years earlier finally got validation and support. From tragedy came change. From darkness came light. From death came life-saving legislation. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it worth it. 14 children and 2 adults should never have died. But at least their deaths meant something. At least they're remembered. At least they changed the world. 18 years. That's how long the Pinewood 14 remained missing. 18 years of searching, grieving, wondering, hoping against hope. 18 years before the truth finally emerged from the woods. The families say closure is a strange thing. It doesn't feel the way they expected. It doesn't bring relief, exactly. It brings a different kind of pain, a concrete pain instead of an abstract one. The pain of certainty instead of the pain of not knowing. But most of them say they prefer it this way. They'd rather know, as horrible as the truth is, than spend the rest of their lives wondering. Thomas Brennan destroyed so many lives. Directly, through his abuse and murders. Indirectly, through the ripple effects on families, communities, and systems. He was one person, but the damage he caused spread like poison through water, touching everything, contaminating everything. Eleanor Hayes tried to stop him and paid the ultimate price. She made mistakes in how she tried to save those children. She panicked. She made desperate decisions without thinking through all the consequences. But she saw evil and she tried to fight it, and that counts for something. Rob Turner died a hero's death. There's no ambiguity there. He fought a man with a gun to protect children. That's the definition of heroism. And the Pinewood 14, Sarah, Marcus, Olivia, Daniel, Emma, Lucas, Sophia, Nathan, Ava, Ethan, Mia, Jackson, Isabella, and Noah. They were just kids who wanted to go on a field trip. They died because an adult they should have been able to trust was a monster, and because another adult's attempt to save them went horribly wrong. They deserve better. They deserve to grow up, to have lives, to have futures. They deserve justice while they were alive, not 18 years after they died. But now at least they have peace. They've been brought home. They've been laid to rest. Their families have answers. Their memories are honored. And the systems that failed them have been reformed so that fewer children will suffer the same fate. The Pinewood 14 will never be forgotten. Their names are carved in stone. Their story is told. Their legacy lives on in the laws passed to protect children, in the awareness raised about abuse, in the community that learned to see danger even in familiar faces. November 12, 2007 started as a beautiful day in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. By nightfall, it had become the worst day in the town's history. For 18 years, it remained an open wound, a question without an answer, a pain without resolution. Now finally, there is resolution. Not the happy ending anyone wanted, but resolution nonetheless. The Pinewood 14 are home. May they rest in peace. This case, as heartbreaking as it is, reminds us why stories like these need to be told. Not to sensationalize tragedy, but to remember victims, honor heroes, and learn from failures. Here at Ultimate Crime Stories, we're committed to telling these stories with respect, with thorough research, and with the goal of keeping important cases in the public consciousness. If this story moved you, if you believe these cases deserve to be remembered, please subscribe to Ultimate Crime Stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we post new content. Share this video with someone who appreciates deep dive true crime storytelling. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts. We read every single one. And most importantly, if you see something, say something. Eleanor Hayes saw something and tried to do something about it. Her methods were flawed, but her courage was real. Be like Eleanor. Speak up. Protect the vulnerable. Don't look away from evil just because it's uncomfortable. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for caring about the Pinewood 14. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and stay vigilant. This is Ultimate Crime Stories, where every case matters, every victim is remembered, and the truth always comes to light, even if it takes 18 years.